surgically removed.
This is our second section on sun protection. This is Dr. Steve Wolf. I'm a dermatologist. Let's just summarize what we covered in the first section. We talked about ultraviolet light. We said that it's an invisible form of light that you can't see, and it's a form of light, some forms of which penetrate through the ozone. Those forms are UVA and UVB, and they're light that causes sunburns and tans, sun damage, aging of the skin, and most importantly, skin cancer later. The more of it you get now, the more problems you have later. In the past, they used to say that half of your lifetime exposure occurred under age 18. That's probably not technically correct, but certainly a good amount of sun occurs below age 18 when you're outside every day playing in school. Ultraviolet light might be something you can't see, but it can hurt you. So this section is about how to protect yourself. And there's 5, maybe 6 ways. And I'm going to briefly comment on one of the things we're going to talk about in detail shortly, sunscreen. I think we spend a lot of emphasis thinking about sunscreen. I think we need to spend more emphasis on some other methods. So let's start with the first, shade. That's intuitively one of the best things you could do if you're not directly in the sun. But just being in the shade doesn't always protect you either. I was in the shade in the Dominican Republic. I was sitting under an umbrella with a lot of the protective clothing I'm about to show you. And when I took my UV meter in the shade under the umbrella, it lit up wicked fast. But when I took this UV meter and I put it under my shirt, it didn't light up any. We'll come back to this shirt and what this shirt is all about. But shade is a good thing. It's better to be in the shade than not be in the shade. And I hope that one day your school gets the shade structure that they're trying to get, because I know it can protect you now. So the first way to protect yourself is shade. The second way to protect yourself is clothing. And I actually think this is the thing we should spend the most time on. How do we protect with clothing? Well, let's talk about this. So you're at the beach and you decide to keep a shirt on. Well, now let's change that. A tank top, a white tank top. So all your arms are exposed, and your white tank top, because you've been in the water, is now wet. A white, wet t-shirt or a tank top only has an SPF of about 3 or 4. That's what the American Cancer Society says. Non-wet, it has an SPF of about 7 or 8. So the ways you want to protect yourself are through clothes. The clothes that I'm wearing, these pants are UPF 50. UPF is kind of the same thing as SPF. We didn't actually say what SPF is. SPF is sun protection factor. UPF is ultraviolet protection factor. When we talk about sunscreens, I'll explain what UPF and SPF are. But this ranks as a UPF 50. If I'm in the brightest sun in the world and I take this UV meter and I put it underneath, there's nothing coming through. Everything that I'm covered with protects me. Where can you wear these? Maybe you're out on the boat for the weekend, or you're fishing, or you're hunting, you're with your grandfather. These are great clothes. In addition, these clothes come where they can protect you from bugs as well. There's one brand of clothing called Bugs Away. It actually has something called permethrin that protects you from mosquitoes and other bugs, as well as ultraviolet 50. These shirts also come, or this type of clothing also comes in shirts. Some of their shirts have sleeves. Well, of course, you can roll these up. And some of the pants, not these, have zip-off so you can make shorts out of them. I've worn this type of clothing in the Amazon. I've worn it in very sunny places in South America. I wore this clothing recently in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam and Cambodia. And someone came up to my wife and I and said, "Hey, isn't that clothing hot?" It's actually not hot. And we were protected against bugs and sun. The shirt I have on is a really important shirt. Sometimes these shirts are called rash guard. If you go on Amazon.com, you can find a lot of this type of clothing. It's also sun protection factor, or equivalent of 50, and they feel excellent. Even right now, it feels comfortable. When it's hot out, 90 degrees, you're at the beach, they're wet, they dry fast. You ever see, like, even if you go on the American Academy of Dermatology website and they tell you how to put sunscreen on, we'll come to that in a second. You got this woman, let's say, and her husband's there. And, well, no, let's leave the woman out of this. You got this guy there, he's there by himself, and he's got this spray sunscreen. And he goes, shh, and then he goes, shh. And about an hour later, he's got all these big red stripes on his back because he missed half of his back. Now, how stupid is that? Well, it's pretty stupid. All the guy needed to do was wear this shirt, and he wouldn't have to use sunscreen at all. How else can we protect ourselves? Samson over here, he's showing you that it's important to protect from sun from your eyes, because you can get cataracts. You can burn your eyes, actually. I'm not sure how easy that is to do. Samson's got a hat on. Now let's talk about hats. Hats come in caps, and they come in brimmed hats. Let's think you're a guy and you go to the Daytona 500 and you got a baseball cap on. Remember something I told you earlier? 50 hours a year I cut people's ears. Now that's one of the guys who was at the Daytona 500. He's got the baseball cap on, but his ears are straight up, completely uncovered. They make caps that have these little protectors on them. So when you put it on, you got ear and neck protection. Remember the thing I told you about the neck? Look at your parents' neck, your uncle, your grandparents. See what the left side of their neck looks like. See if it's more damaged. It's because when they're driving. So how do you protect in the car? Well, sunscreen would be a good idea. So we have sun protective clothing that comes in pants, sun protective clothing that comes in long sleeves. We've got swimwear. Now if we do all these things, and then we say, we talked about shade, we talked about clothing, ways to protect our eyes, swim shirts, protective clothing that's UPF, the equivalent of SPF, UPF 50, some with bug stuff in it, sold by the brand called Bugs Away. Excellent products. This is really protective stuff. So maybe you are at the beach. Okay, fine, you go in the water, you got your bathing suit on under this, it's all fine. You take this off, you're fine. But then when you come out, you're under the umbrella. It's better to be protected with clothing. The third way to protect is sunscreen. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about sunscreen, things about sunscreen. I think very few people use it, but the first comment I'm going to make is I consider sunscreen to be secondary or the third form of protection. I didn't tell you not to be outside, but stay in the shade and use protective clothing. If you've got protective clothing, this part of my body, front and back, is about 36% of my body surface area. I got a third of my body protected. I don't need any sunscreen. Now sunscreen. SPF stands for sun protection factor. Let's say you go out in the sun and after 1 hour on an average day, you burn. An SPF of 15 only allows 1/15 of the sun. Technically, it would say you could stay out 15 hours, though I think that's a bad thing to teach you, because then I'd be encouraging you to stay out 15 times longer. An SPF 30 allows 1/30 of the sun, about 3%. An SPF of 50 allows 1/50 of the sun, about 2%. If we compare that 30, allows about 3% of the sun, and the 50 allows 2% of the sun, you know what? There ain't much difference. But I do think you should use the SPF 30 or higher. Sunscreen comes in lots of different varieties. We'll come back to these potentially a little more in the last video. The best sunscreen is the one that you use. I recommend an SPF 30 or higher. They come as creamy products. Women tend to like this one. It's moisturizing, almost looks like a makeup. Can be put on over makeup. Men, and I guess probably young men, 10, 11 years old, they're not going to put it on if you don't like it. I encourage sprays. This is one that's an SPF 50. Sorry, malfunction. Well, spray, okay, excellent. This one's just a lot easier to get on. Sorry that's not working today. Sunscreen's the third way to protect. What's the fourth way to protect? Remember, light reflects. If you take the UV meter and you put it under that umbrella at the beach, it's going to light up wickedly. Johnny? Johnny, wake up back there, I'm talking. Remember, you get the point now or get the point later. So the fourth thing is, remember about things like water, sand, and snow, because light reflects. So just because you're under that umbrella doesn't mean that the sun isn't hitting that sand and bouncing right back at you. So you think you're protected. Let's say you're under that umbrella. You go, I'm in the shade. That's the first thing you said, Dr. Wolf. Well, it might be, but I told you other things that were important, like clothing. The last thing is tanning beds. A lot of people say tanning beds are fine. Some people advertise them as they don't burn. Well, if they didn't burn, technically they would have UVA radiation. Those rays do not burn, but they still damage your skin. And the fact is that tanning beds have both UVA and UVB. Most people do burn. But even if you didn't burn, think of this. You stay in a tanning bed for 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. That's like getting 10 years of exposure. People don't stay in the sun all day, every day. You got to go to school. Your parents have to work. You're not on vacation all the time. Tanning beds are bad. The biggest group of people who use them are teenage women, just a few years older than you guys are. And I would encourage you never to go. So just to summarize this segment was about how to protect from the sun. We talked about 5 things. We talked about shade, but still not perfect. Stuff reflects. We talked about protective clothing. In my opinion, one of the most important things you can do. Hats that protect over your ears and your neck. Shirts, pants, swim shirts. If nothing else, I would tell you should keep a swim shirt, long sleeve on when you're at the beach, some sunscreen and stay in the shade. That would be probably reasonable. I'm not sure you're going to practically cover over your legs. Though when I've been at the beach, I do, unless I'm in the water. We talked about reflection, water, sand, and snow. We talked about tanning beds. The 6th method, one that's rarely talked about, is a supplement. This is actually called Heliocare. It comes from a fern plant that comes from South and Central America. The way they did the study was they would expose little squares of skin on someone's arm and see how long it took to give them a burn. And they'd give them a burn, a bad burn, and a really bad burn. Then they'd let them take this pill, and they'd re-expose their left arm, and each side was less burned. Heliocare is available on Amazon.com. I have no financial connection. It's something that might reduce sunburns and reduce damage if you're doing all the other things to protect. It's only taken on the days that you're exposed. So remember, protect yourself. Stay in the shade. Wear protective clothing. Use sunscreen. But don't think of sunscreen as your only protection. Beware of reflection. And don't go to tanning beds. And remember, if you don't get the point now, you're going to get the point later.